Hey guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peter! Boom boom, review stuff, and I am back for another review of a television show, my 60th television show that I have watched in 2022. Let's round off that number 60 with making it the worst television show that I have watched in 2022. And that is The Patient that I watched on Hulu. I think it was an FX TV show. I don't know. It was so bad, you guys. It was so bad. And the only thing that I am happy about is that it is finally over. And I really wasn't sure how this was going to end, this show. So first of all, you know, as I say in all of my videos, that this review is going to contain spoilers. Okay, so if you haven't watched The Patient, don't waste your time. Trust me. Okay, I wasted way too much time watching The Patient. And you might ask yourself first, before we get into this, Peter, why would you watch a television show and make it 10 episodes if you really didn't like it? Like, why would you not just stop it when you knew that it really wasn't that good? And when did you know that it really wasn't that good? And what I would say to that is two things. Number one, I knew by the second episode that it was horrible. And number two, I blame my cousin Caroline completely, because my cousin Caroline and I, we drive around once a week and we go get brunch and we talk about TV shows that we're watching and things like that, right? And so we love Hulu shows, and so she had started The Patient, and she was like, have you started The Patient? And I said, no. And so she said, well, it's really, really good, and I think that you would like it, and whatever. So I started watching it so that it would give us something to talk about, right? And I watched the first episode, and I was like, okay, this is an interesting kind of topic, kind of theme. So what it is Steve Carell is a therapist. He is not funny in this. It's a completely dramatic role for him. And I will say, given that, because I know that a lot of people know Steve Carell from his comedic roles and things like that, I'm not a huge fan of Steve Carell just because I don't know him from a lot of things. It's not that I don't like him or anything like that. It's just, I'm not a huge fan. Like, you know, I just don't watch all the things that he's in. So anyway, but it is a dramatic role for him. I will say that he is fantastic. Like, all of the actors in it are absolutely fantastic, right? It's just that it's so slow and boring. So what happens is the show starts, and Steve Carell, who is a therapist, he wakes up and he is chained to the wall, like chained, like with a metal chain, to the wall in a basement. And he has no idea where he's at. And then what he finds out is that this guy, who I would say is probably, I don't know, late 20s, 30 maybe, who has been his patient, has chained him to the basement, okay? And the reason that he has chained him to the basement is because he is a serial killer, and he wants to stop killing people. And so he believes that the only way for that to happen, for him to trust Steve Carell as a therapist that's not going to report him for being a serial killer — my dog is sneezing, bless you, Boo Radley — the only way for him to trust Steve Carell to not, like, tell the police or the authorities is for him to chain him to the basement and for them to do therapeutic work in the basement, okay? So that's kind of the premise for the show. And that's what you get for the next 9 episodes, all right? Now, there are a few things that are thrown in there. Like, I think it's the end of the second episode. There's a cliffhanger where it shows somebody walking down the stairs when he's gone, the guy's gone, the serial killer guy. And because of course he totally blends into society, and he has a normal job. He's like a restaurant, not investigator, I don't know what it's called. He's like he does, what do you call it? Like food and health he like goes and does checks for restaurants and things like that, right? So at the end of the episode 2, you see somebody coming down the stairs, and you find out in episode 3 that this guy who is divorced. He was married, and now he's divorced, and he lives with his mother. And his mother doesn't want to turn him over to the authorities or the police because she's in a lot of denial, and she has a lot of guilt because he was abused physically by his father when he was growing up, and she didn't do anything. She didn't step in and stop it. So she feels a lot of blame for that, and she thinks that's why he is the way that he is. Okay, you kind of find that out through the show. At the beginning half of the show, the killer, his name's Sam. He is fixated on this guy that is like his parents own this Greek restaurant, and so he doesn't like the way that he talks to him one day because he talks to him like in a patronizing manner, and so he wants to kill him. And then it's like back and forth, all these therapy sessions of like he brings him. Every episode is like he brings him food, and then they sit down, and then Steve Carell tries to convince him not to kill somebody, and then that's the end of the episode. It's so boring, you guys. And every episode, like for the first 6, are like 23 minutes long, and then it goes to like 35, and then it's like the last episode is like 46 minutes long. It makes no sense. So then it's like, I thought throughout watching this series that the show was really about Steve Carell trying to get free from the serial killer, right? Because like at one point, this Greek guy, like he brings him back and then he kills him, right? And so Steve Carell like writes a note on this piece of paper and he like stuffs it in his mouth, this dead guy's mouth, and then he convinces Sam, the serial killer, to go drop the body somewhere so the family can have it. And so what he's hoping is that when the family finds the body, they'll find the note in the mouth and then he'll be freed, right? So there's a subtext to the whole show that he's going to be freed. And I'm sitting there watching it at this point, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, either this is a thriller, and he's either going to be freed at the end, and there's going to be some kind of justice, or what we're going to find out is that he is this serial killer, and we know that they're really not curable, okay? And so he's going to end up killing Steve Carell at the end of the show, and that's going to be the end of the show, right? Okay. Throughout this whole show is woven this backstory of Steve Carell being Jewish. And that his son, when his son gets married, becomes Orthodox Hebrew. And because of his wife's family. And that it kind of causes dissension in the family between his son and his mother. And so there's a lot of this stuff about like the Hebrew religion and what you do when somebody dies, and there's a lot of that in there, okay? And then I would say about episode 5 or 6, they start showing scenes from like Steve Carell is like, he'll be dreaming, and he like has these scenes where he's like in a Nazi concentration camp, okay? And then there's also scenes where he's talking to a therapist, and I think it's like a therapist he saw at one point, like as a mentor. But he's like dreaming it, but like not dreaming it like asleep, like daydreaming it, like he's actually having the conversation, like what to do, right? And it's not really like he's losing his mind or anything like that. It's very conscious, but it was at that point, especially because as a reader, there's a part in there where he talks about Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl, who's a very famous author, who was a concentration camp survivor, he wakes him up at this one point in the concentration camp and Viktor Frankl looks at him and says something about, "Don't wake me up." And he talks about this quote that is like a famous Viktor Frankl quote that is, when your reality is worse than your worst nightmare. And so like I was like, at this point of watching this show, that at first started with you're just trying to kind of figure out what's going on, into this thriller, into this subtext of all of this stuff that's going on, I was like, is this show like super deep and I'm missing the point? Like this show at a half an hour each episode for 10 episodes really shouldn't be that deep. Like it really shouldn't be that deep, or you should have made it that deep from the very beginning. And so I was very confused about the whole show, okay? And then it's like, in the 9th episode, really nothing happens again. And I'm like, so we've got one episode left of like a half an hour to tie all of these loose ends up. There's no way he's going to get out of here. And I was convinced at that point, I was like, because my cousin and I, we talked about it, and I said, I think he's going to kill him because that's what serial killers do, and we're going to find that out. And she said, no, she said, I think he's going to end up killing the serial killer, and then he's going to get free. Well, what happens in the last episode is that he calls the mother downstairs, and he holds his blade that he's been like sharpening with this metal. I think it's like a toothpaste thing or something. He's been like sharpening it, and he holds it to her throat, and then he calls Sam, the serial killer, down, and he comes down. And very quickly, I mean, it happens literally like in less than 30 seconds. The serial killer kills Steve Carell. And that's the end of it. And Steve Carell has written this whole note to his children as kind of closure because his wife died of cancer. And so his wife never really got to have closure with her son because of the dissension in the family and things like that. And so it's all about bringing the family together. And then Sam puts the body somewhere so the family can have it because that's important to Jewish families, he says in this note that he types up. And then he includes this letter with Steve Carell that Steve Carell wrote. And then it shows the daughter reading it and crying, and then it shows her like showing her brother, and then her brother is in counseling, and it's like the whole thing starts all over again, if you get it. Like, he's in therapy, and the therapist asks him, like, where do you want to start? And he's like, I don't know where to start. And he was like, anywhere is good. And he's like, and then it shuts off. And it's just like, I don't know. It's like, I feel like the show went in with a purpose. And like, I would have been so down for this deep, deep, deep show. Because y'all know, if you watch my videos, I love a good deep show. Okay, I do. And I would have been so down for that if it would have started on episode 1 and kind of carried that all the way through. But that wasn't the case. I mean, it kind of alluded to certain things, but like, it didn't even do a good job of telling the story all the way through. And I know there are a lot of people out there that really like this show. Like, when I tweeted out something the other day and I said the worst show of 2022, and a couple people were like, oh, I really liked it. I mean, you know, I think like whatever we like, you know, like is all about perspective, right? So, you know, but for me, it just was so boring. Like, I literally found myself, I mean, I would sit there and I would watch it, and I'd be like on Instagram, and I'd be like watching my iPad, like, God, is this episode over yet? And I found myself just watching it because I wanted to find out what happened in the end. And I never say this with television shows. So I talked to my cousin the day before. Was it the day before that I watched it? No, she watched it, and then it was the day that I watched it, so yesterday. And she said to me, she goes, well, what did you think of the ending? And I said, I haven't watched it yet. And I said, was there even a conclusion? And she said, yeah, more than the watcher. And I said, well, I hope there's some kind of conclusion. And she even, who loved the show through the whole season, she said, yeah, it was really not very good ending. And it wasn't. It just was so like poorly written. The whole thing was written. It was like you had 4 writers in a room, and each of them had a good idea, but they didn't know how to make the story work together. And I rarely say this, but I actually think this is a story that would have worked better as a movie, not as a television show in 10 parts. And I hope to God there won't be a sequel. Steve Carell's dead, and he was really the draw of the show. So yeah, it was really, I'm trying to think of other things about it but there really wasn't anything that, you know, I wanted to say that really pulled me out, you know? And there was also, like, at the very end, was kind of when you could tell Steve Carell had kind of, like, given up, and he was, like, he couldn't do it anymore. And so, like, he said these things to the mother, and he was like, I know you're not going to want to hear this. And this is, like, the other thing that was, like, hard for me watching it, was that he was, like, he, like, stayed in this monotone therapist role the whole time, and, like, he's, like, going crazy, and I know that he was trying to save his life, and so he was trying to, like, be whatever he could be, but, like, at some point, it's like you would think that he would break down or whatever, and there's, like, this role when he was, like, to the mother, and he was like, I know that this is going to be hard for you to hear, but, and then he, like, hands her these Kleenex, and I'm like, what is going on with this show? I'm so confused by this show. Like, he sees somebody killed right in front of him, and, like, he does kind of react to that, and like, the Sam guy says, what's wrong with you? And he's like, you just killed somebody, like, in front of me. You know, like, but, like, that's the biggest reaction that you see. I don't know. Could somebody explain this show to me in the comment section below? Like, I felt so dumb. Do you ever feel dumb watching a show? Like, I do feel like this. Like, TV should not, like, I watched Severance on Apple TV, and I got it, okay? And I'm not big into science fiction, but I got it, and I loved that show. This show made me feel stupid. I felt so stupid and dumb watching this show. I thought, what am I missing? I'm not that stupid, you know? Like, I got a master's degree, okay? I'm not that stupid, but I can't figure out this show to save my life. And I don't watch TV shows to make me feel dumb. I watch TV shows to make me feel a little bit smarter, you know? So anyway, that was a big for me. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.